Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down a pretty striking analysis of how a single regional conflict could, potentially, reshape our entire world. And it all comes down to one simple, powerful idea. Right here, this is the key. According to the analysis we're digging into, everything about our modern life, the food on our tables, the stuff we buy, the very cities we live in, it's all built on a foundation of cheap, accessible energy. So you have to ask, what happens when that foundation gets shattered? So how does this all kick off? Well, the scenario laid out here begins with a very specific catalyst, a long, drawn-out war in the Middle East. But this isn't a war for a quick victory. No, this one is designed to deliberately target the world's energy supply. The goal, as argued in the source, is to push the price of oil so high that it intentionally sends the global system into shock. We're talking $200 a barrel. This isn't just an unfortunate side effect, it's the strategy. It's using energy as a weapon to completely change the rules of the game. Okay, so what happens when that energy shock hits? The analysis predicts it's going to light a fire under three major global trends that will completely remake the world as we know it. Let's get into them. The source calls this whole process the Great Unraveling, and it's like a chain reaction, a domino effect. First, you get de-industrialization. That triggers deurbanization, and that, in turn, leads to expansionism. Let's look at how that first domino falls. This first shockwave is where you really start to see how fragile our modern world actually is. You know, all these systems that we completely rely on every single day, they're basically balanced on a knife's edge. So the first thing to go is industry. I mean, think about it. Modern manufacturing is all about these incredibly complex global supply chains, and the whole thing runs on cheap fuel. When the cost to ship things skyrockets, it's just not profitable anymore to bring in raw materials and ship out finished goods, and that kicks off a rapid deindustrialization. And that industrial collapse slams right into our cities. That's domino number 2, deurbanization. Without factories, the jobs dry up. At the same time, the cost of trucking in food, water, and all the necessities becomes just impossibly high. The whole economic model that keeps our megacities alive just breaks. And this leads us straight to the third shockwave. If you're a nation and you want to keep your industries running, but you can't afford to import the resources you need anymore, what's your alternative? You've got to secure them closer to home. And the analysis suggests this creates a huge incentive for military expansion to go out and take those resources by force. Now, in this new world of scarcity, the impact isn't the same for everyone. There are going to be clear winners and losers. So let's take a look at the region-by-region breakdown of who's most at risk. According to this analysis, the biggest loser in this whole scenario is going to be the GCC nations. Their immense wealth is described as a mirage because it's not built on sustainable foundations. It's built on two very fragile pillars, the petrodollar and American military protection. So here's why that's so critical. The petrodollar system is basically the deal where Gulf nations sell their oil for US dollars, and then they invest that cash back into the American economy. For decades, that deal has basically guaranteed them American military protection. But if that deal falls apart, if that protection goes away, so does their security. And all those futuristic desert cities become incredibly vulnerable. The analysis also points to Africa as being especially vulnerable. You've got many nations across the continent that are incredibly dependent on food and energy imports just to sustain their people. So when those global supply chains break down, the prediction is a worst-case scenario. We're talking about food rationing and potentially widespread famine. And you see the same kind of logic applied to the very densely populated, trade-heavy nations of Southeast Asia. Their whole economic model is built on importing cheap energy to make goods for export. When that system of global trade breaks, their economic lifeline is just gone. But it's not all doom and gloom for every nation. And this is where the analysis gets really fascinating and honestly a little counterintuitive. It looks at the two giants of East Asia, Japan and China, and asks, in this new world order, who's better positioned to not just survive, but to thrive? The argument here is really something else. I mean, look at this table. On paper, Japan seems weak, right? An aging population and totally dependent on imported resources. But the analysis points to its core strength, a culture of resilience, an entrepreneurial spirit that it proved when it rebuilt itself after the war. China, on the other hand, it's a manufacturing giant, but that very strength, its massive state-controlled system, is seen as too rigid, too slow to adapt when the global trade it depends on suddenly disappears. So here's the bottom line. The prediction basically bets on Japan's culture, its ability to innovate its way out of a crisis. It sees China's economic model as being too rigid and way too dependent on that old globalized system to handle a shock of this magnitude. And this analysis leaves us with one last, pretty provocative thought. It really forces you to reconsider what power even means. Maybe it's not just about who has the biggest economy or the strongest military today. Maybe true power is about resilience and the ability to adapt and thrive in whatever world comes next.